On today's episode of Luthorville, we'll be exploring the question, how you can earn a commercial driver's license in 10 easy steps.
In February of 2016, as part of my full-time RV/tiny house project called Luthorville, I earned a commercial driver's license, also known as a CDL or a Class A license, in the Golden State of California. Now, along with my endorsements, this CDL authorizes me to legally drive motorcycles, cars, buses, big rig 18-wheeler trucks, farm equipment, military vehicles, and tow great big trailers behind pickups and flatbeds. Now, I have seen numerous videos on the internet filled with misinformation explaining the steps required to get a CDL. Now, I want to help people get the correct information. So, I created this video to accurately explain all the steps involved. That way, if you are thinking about getting a CDL, you will know exactly what you're getting yourself into. Now, before I begin, I want to reiterate that I earned my Class A license in the state of California. While there are federal guidelines mandating CDL laws, every state has specific nuances governing their own rules and regulations. So, while 90% of what I tell you is going to apply everywhere across this great nation of ours, there will be some things that may differ in your state. Now, I want to make that clear because those who live in Iowa or Pennsylvania or Florida might not need to follow these exact same steps. The process I'm about to share applies to California in 2016. However, laws and regulations are constantly changing. In a few years or even a few months, this process could be different in California too. But as of February of 2016, this is what you needed to do step by step to earn a Class A CDL in California. Step number 1, find a quality trucking school. Step number 2, study the CDL handbook. Step 3, get your medical certificate. Step 4, pass the written tests at the DMV and earn your commercial learner's permit, or CLP. Step 5, memorize the air brake test. Step 6, memorize the incab inspection. Step 7, memorize the pre-trip inspection. Step 8, learn backing and maneuverability skills. Step 9, learn driving skills. And finally, step 10, pass the test at the DMV and earn your CDL. So, let's go over each of those steps in detail. Step number 1, find a quality trucking school. How do you find a good trucking school? I started at a school called Dutzen in Arcadia, California. They seemed really cool. Dutzen has been around for decades. They have been featured on numerous television programs. I studied under a 2-tour Vietnam combat vet named Phil, who even trained a few celebrity clients like Michelle Monaghan. Now, Dutzen offered a 10-hour training program, which seemed like a great deal. It was far shorter and less expensive than any other school I found. Unfortunately, even with extra classes, I failed my DMV test twice. I slowly began to realize a 10-hour course simply wasn't enough time for me. I transferred to a school called Alliance in Chatsworth, California. Took their 20-hour accelerated program under a great instructor named Sandy and passed my DMV test on my very first attempt. In fact, this right here is the very truck that I used. This is the truck at Alliance School of Trucking in lovely Chatsworth, California. And that is the truck that I took to the DMV in February of 2016 in order to earn my Class A commercial driver's license. Now, in the end, I had about 40 hours of training between the two schools. Now, people who have had some past experience driving trucks or trailers can often do well in a 20-hour program. Those who have never towed a trailer or driven any kind of truck typically require about a 40-hour program to learn all the required skills. Some people, they need more time than that. And if you happen to need 60 or 80 hours, don't be embarrassed. That's perfectly okay. There's no shame in requiring a little more time. Now, most trucking schools offer an average class duration of about 40 hours. And in those 40-hour programs, you'll frequently find 50% of the students fail the test on the first try. Now, where do I get those statistics? Well, when you look for a school in California, be sure to check the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary Education, or the BPPE website. Now, I don't know if any other states have similar programs, but in California, all vocational schools, including trucking schools, are required to post their class catalogs and the performance evaluation of their students. This is fantastic because it allows you to research which schools are effective at training their students and which ones don't do a very good job of graduating people. Here are a few examples.
So here we can see GSF Truck Driving School graduated 44% of their students. Universal Truck Driving School graduated 26%. Dolphin graduated 100%. Alliance School of Trucking graduated 75.5%. And Dutzen graduated 50% of their students. And again, all of this information and all of these charts and all these percentages have been researched and sourced from that government website.
Now, when you start researching trucking schools, be sure to look them up on that website and confirm how many students pass their driver's test at that school. Are they graduating 90% of their students or 30% of their students? This is very important to take into consideration. When I found Dutzen, I was simply looking at the cost and how far a commute I would have in order to get to classes. Don't make the same mistake I made. Be sure to find out the most important variable of all. How good are they at training people? Sure, they might be 10 minutes from your house and offer a 10-hour course, but if only a tiny percentage of their students pass the test, then what good is attending that school? Do a little research and find out how effective their training is. Step number 2, study the CDL handbook. Now, the normal driver's handbook consists of about 100 pages, and it's mostly common sense. The commercial driver's handbook is over 200 pages and requires you to memorize tons of information which isn't remotely intuitive at all. Things like name some key steering system parts. What is the minimum tread depth for front tires and for other tires? What 3 things add up to total stopping distance? Describe the proper braking technique when going down a long, steep downgrade. What 4 things related to cargo are drivers responsible for? Why must air tanks be drained? How can you test the low pressure warning signal? Describe what the service line is for. Those are just a few examples. This isn't common sense knowledge that you already possess. In order to pass the written tests to get your permit at the DMV, you're gonna need to study the handbook. It took me a long time to prepare. This wasn't something I picked up in 2 days. Now, I consider myself a fairly bright guy, but I had to study the handbook every single night for about a week before I felt confident enough to take the written DMV tests. Step number 3, get your medical certificate. You're going to need to pass a physical exam to make sure you are capable of safely driving a commercial truck. Now, there are only certain doctors who are registered with the DMV to perform these tests, so you may not be allowed to go to your regular doctor. Also, be sure to remember to renew your medical certificate every 2 years. In California, the medical form is called a DL51. And don't worry, they don't draw blood or give you suppositories or anything like that. They just they check your eyesight and your hearing and have you pee in a cup, that kind of thing. It's pretty easy. Okay, step 4. Pass the written test of the DMV and earn your commercial learner's permit, or CLP. Bring your medical certificate with you when you go to the DMV. And when you take your written test at the DMV, you need to retake everything, including your original passenger license written tests. As a motorcyclist, I even had to retake the motorcycle tests. That means I had to pass a total of 5 tests. The Class C, the motorcycle, the Class A, air brakes, and combined trailer. Now, I am proud to say I successfully passed all 5 written tests on my very first try. The woman at the DMV even complimented me and said that out of the hundreds of tests they administer every single day, I was the only person in the last 2 weeks to successfully pass every test on the first try. So that was kind of cool. So once you have your CLP, you're ready to start your lessons at the truck driving school. Now, on your big day, you're going to need to pass a total of 5 different tests at the DMV. Air brakes, in-cab inspection, pre-trip inspection, maneuverability skills, and driving skills. So, let's go over each of those. Step number 5, memorize the air brake test. Also known as the COLA test, which stands for cut out low air. This is the first test you are given at the DMV. Now, unlike the other tests, which permit you to make a few mistakes, the COLA test must be flawless. You cannot make one single error. If you say something wrong, or you do the incorrect steps and make any mistakes, in the COLA test, you fail and they send you home. You must memorize the entire thing. You can't have any notes or reference materials. Now, I won't go over all the details of the test. You'll learn all that in the school, but I will say the test is in 5 parts. First is governor cutout. Make sure the governor cuts out before 130 psi. Next is governor cut in. Make sure the governor cuts in no lower than 100 psi. Then you do the 460 applied test, checking the system loses no more than 4 psi in 60 seconds. After that is the low air warning light / buzzer. The warning must activate between 55 and 75 psi. And finally is the spring brake test. Now the spring brakes have to activate between 20 and 45 psi. Still remember it. Now, when I took my final test, the truck failed on the 460 applied test. But I think it was because I was so nervous. I was like stomping on the brake a little too hard. So I asked the examiner for permission to retake the test, and the truck passed on the second attempt. So the reason I didn't fail was because I didn't make a technical error. The truck simply didn't pass. So by retaking that test and proving that the braking system was functional and safe, I was able to move on. So, step number 6, memorize the in-cab inspection. Now, during the in-cab, which takes around 5 minutes, you will need to name the various parts inside the cab of the truck, from the windshield to the mirrors to the fire extinguisher and plenty more. You have to explain to the examiner what all the parts are and what all your instrument gauges should be reading during normal driving conditions, and what kind of flaws and damage you're checking for in all these systems. Now, just like the air brake test, you have to memorize all this information. There's no notes, no reference materials, no looking in the handbook. It's all got to be in your head. Now, this yellow checklist from the DMV shows what the examiner is looking for.
Now, the part that I highlighted here in the blue oval, that is what the examiner is looking at when you're doing the in-cab inspection for the truck.
Step number 7, memorize the pre-trip inspection. The pre-trip should take you about 20 to 30 minutes to complete. Walking around the outside of the tractor and trailer, you need to name and point out numerous parts of the truck and explain what they do and how to check them for problems. Note that, like the air brake and in-cab inspection, you must memorize all this information. You can't have it written down. You must perform the entire test from memory. Now, this yellow checklist from DMV shows what the examiner is looking for.
Once again, I've used a blue highlight to emphasize the section of the checklist that is used for the pre-trip inspection. These are all the parts that you have to name and explain to the examiner when you're doing the test.
Step number 8, learn backing and maneuverability skills. Now, when you go to the DMV, you'll be tested on 3 out of 6 potential maneuverability skills. Now, since you never know which 3 skills you'll be asked to perform, you have to master all 6 skills. And the skills are straight line backing, alley docking, offset right, offset left, parallel right, and parallel left. That's right, boys and girls. You thought it was hard when you had to parallel park in a car? You're going to have to learn how to parallel park a truck on both the driver's and the passenger side, plus 4 more skills on top of those. Now, I had a rough time learning the backing skills. In order to get in some extra practice, I even rented a U-Haul trailer, and on the weekends I hooked it up to my truck and set up orange traffic cones and would run drills by myself. Over the next 3 or 4 weekends, I would spend 4 or 5 hours doing those 6 skills over and over again. The day I took my test at the DMV, I still came close to failing on the alley dock because I was so nervous. Step number 9, learn the driving skills. Now, if you've never driven a vehicle that requires double clutching or has a 10-speed transmission, yeah, you're in for a very interesting learning experience. Now, be careful that you never stall the truck or allow the back tires of the trailer to hit a curb when you're making a turn. Those will be automatic failures on your test. At the very end of my test, leaving the driving skills area, I literally missed a right-hand curb by about an inch. I watched it happen in my mirror, horrified, because I couldn't correct it by that point. Thankfully, I passed. I didn't go over the curb, but I came incredibly close. And most important of all, obviously, don't cause an accident, don't run anybody over, and watch for trailer off-tracking on curves, and be sure to stay in your lane. This yellow checklist from the DMV again shows what the examiner is looking for.
Now, as you can see, this checklist is the biggest one of all. This is basically all the ways that you could potentially screw up. So don't do any of this stuff.
Finally, step number 10, pass the test at DMV, earn your CDL. Finally, you get to your big day at the DMV, where you're going to be tested on all these skills. And when you pass the test, the DMV will immediately hand you a sheet of paper, which acts as your temporary permit, valid for 90 days, and will send you an actual license in the mail in about 2 weeks or so. As you can see, there is a massive amount of information to learn. And now that you know what it takes, when you see shysters on the internet claiming you can get a CDL without attending trucking school, or you can earn your CDL in a couple of days. Do you believe them? I mean, how can you learn to drive a truck without trucking school? Do you know a professional trucker who owns his own rig and will let you borrow it? No? Well, if not, where are you going to get access to a truck so you can practice your skills? You aren't going to buy a massive Peterbilt semi-truck. Even if you were a wealthy millionaire, you couldn't legally drive that truck home. There's no such thing as a place to rent a big rig for the weekend. And even if there was a company that rented 18-wheeler trucks, they wouldn't let you rent one without a Class A license. So you're right back where you started. In order to get a CDL, you have to attend a trucking school. There are no shortcuts, and no school teaches all this in 3 days. In fact, after you get your CLP, federal regulations demand a 2-week waiting period before you can take your driving and skills tests. According to the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 49, Subtitle B, Chapter 3, Subchapter A, Part 383, Subpart B, Section 383.25, the Commercial Learner's Permit, CLP, Paragraph 6, Subparagraph E, quote, the CLP holder is not eligible to take the CDL skills test in the first 14 days after initial issuance of the CLP. So, any school or training facility claiming you can get a license in less than 14 days is not only telling you something that is impossible, it would violate federal regulations. Again, there is absolutely no way that you can complete this whole process in 3 days. 3 weeks? Maybe. 3 months is more realistic. It took me 6 months. Started in August of 2015, finished in February of 2016. The only person who could do this in 3 days is River Tam, because no power in the verse can stop her.
I don't care, I'm still free. You can't take the sky from me.
Now you know what it really takes. If you want to earn your CDL, I say go for it. I achieved getting a Class A, you can do it too. I just don't want you to think it's going to be easy. You see, when you strive to accomplish something in life that's very challenging, but you expected it to be easy, it can quickly become discouraging. However, when you mentally prepare yourself ahead of time with the expectation that this endeavor will be tough to achieve, then despite your setbacks, it becomes easier to stick to your guns and maintain your resolve to succeed. Now, honestly, I think the only license harder to acquire than a CDL is an airplane pilot's license, or space shuttles. Now, I naively thought it would be simple to get a CDL, and I was horribly mistaken. Learning to drive a truck is exceptionally difficult. There is way more to this than I had expected. Now, keep in mind, I'm a smart guy, okay? I've published 5 novels. I've built websites for Walt Disney Studios for over 6 years. I've been a skateboarder for over 20 years, and I can drop into a 12-foot pool with no problem. I have a hang glider pilot's license from the United States Hang Gliding Association and have flown gliders solo at over 6,000 feet. I'm a licensed motorcyclist and have ridden motorcycles in crazy Los Angeles traffic for more than a decade. I've been an equestrian and rode horses on my uncle's ranch for years. That's right, boys and girls. I've been dragged by horses, hit by cars on the highway on a motorcycle, dislocated bones from gnarly skateboarding slams. I mean, I may look like a chipper John Cryer lookalike, but I'm all John Wayne at heart. Now, the reason I'm telling you that I have all these experiences is because I want you to understand, despite having all those abilities which require intelligence, coordination, athleticism, balance, and spatial perception, learning to drive a truck was truly one of the hardest things I've ever done. I was constantly screwing up and getting confused when shifting and backing up the trailer, and my instructors were always quick to tell me how often I was making stupid mistakes. It was exasperating and really disheartening to struggle with it so much, you know. And then you add to that the pressure of knowing you only have 3 chances to pass the test, and if you fail, you need to start all over again from the beginning. So, when you find yourself getting frustrated, don't be discouraged. We all have a hard time learning these skills. I flunked the test twice before I passed. I read about one woman who took the test 6 times before she passed. Imagine how hard that was on her self-esteem. But she never gave up. She passed. When you commit yourself to this journey, when you invest all this time and money into getting this license, it feels like your whole future is riding on passing that test. Your dreams, your career, providing for your family, whatever your motives are for getting a CDL, it all comes down to impressing that examiner sitting next to you. Your whole future is in her hands. After all your financial investment and months of training and drills and practice and studying, it all comes down to that single morning at the DMV. That is a lot of pressure, and you can't bear the idea of failing. Having to go back to school, reschedule your test, having that instructor chiding you every time you screw up. You don't want to go through that anymore. You just want to pass this darn test and go home. Remember, you're not alone. There are 3.5 million licensed truck drivers in the United States, and we have all been right there with you. Only 1% of the population has succeeded in achieving this. We are an elite group. This is a big deal. This will change your life. Yes, earning your CDL is going to be a huge challenge, but just stick to it. Keep at it. Practice, focus, relax. Failure is not an option.